Watching Pauline Hanson on Paul's show last night, I thought, it's time. I mean, it's, past time. Hanson must now put up or risk turning into a rerun of the Joe for Canberra push. Now, this might seem like old history to some, but the parallels are too close for comfort for her and the millions of Australians who've put their hope in Hanson. And voters don't actually change that much. In 1987, another populist, Premier Joe Bjelke-Petersen, stormed out of Queensland, which is Hanson's home state, on a crusade to topple Bob Hawke's Labor government, with lines that could have been written by One Nation's Malcolm Roberts.
Can Bob Hawke be beaten by anything other than a coalition government, a coalition party?
Quite simply, yes, he can.
So you don't need the National Party and the Liberal Party together?
If the National Party behind me supported the policies I had, we could do it ourselves without any problem at all, because the Australian people are fed up to here with everything that the Labor Party are doing. They're trying to run a nation on a cracked foundation. You wouldn't build a house on the foundation they've got of 20-odd different organisations, the Communists, the Socialists, the International Socialists, the majority group, the right and the left, old guard, new guard.
Well, this Joe for Canberra push was huge news at the time, promised the revolution. Joe for Canberra was the slogan. And Joe for PM was the dream. The media was fascinated, a headline every day, and so on. A bit like Hanson at the moment, Bjelke-Petersen had few policies. But he did campaign on a tax that would cost plenty, 25% flat tax. Pauline Hanson has her own big tax idea, income splitting, something that would cost the budget $6 billion a year at least. Plus, there's other expensive promises like halving the fuel excise. That's another $10 billion a year. Now again, like Hanson, Bjelke-Petersen spent little time explaining his policies. He also avoided tricky details. And like Hanson, Bjelke-Petersen had someone who was there to explain what he really thought. Hanson as Barnaby Joyce, Joe had wife Flo, who'd explain her husband even with the man sitting right next to her in the studio.
Does he want to be Prime Minister?
Well, I don't know that you'd say he actually wants to be Prime Minister. I believe that he wants to be sure that Bob Hawke isn't Prime Minister. I think that that's the whole answer, Ray, and he's working very hard to do that. He's got good policies, and I believe they're policies that the ordinary average people will be very happy to have. A policy where it's a 25 cents in the dollar income tax, you know. And to me, if you've got 75 cents in your hand, what are you going to do with it out of every dollar?
You're going to be his campaign manager?
Oh, I suppose I could do a good job, but I'm pretty busy looking after Queensland as one of Queensland's senators, Ray.
But most importantly, like Pauline Hanson, Bjelke-Petersen, a National, split the Conservative vote and robbed all oxygen from the Liberals, then led by John Howard, who was not then the politician he became. Now, of course, Bjelke-Petersen's campaign, it collapsed. Killed largely by a lack of policy, a lack of detail, lack of coherence. And all that Bjelke-Petersen achieved was Howard's defeat and Hawke's triumph. Labor won big. Well, today's News 24 Pulse YouGov poll suggests the same could now happen again, even though Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is no Bob Hawke. More like a sitting duck than a hawk.
Picture this. A larger-than-life Queenslander storms onto the national stage. Cameras can't get enough, the crowds are roaring, and for one shining moment, it looks like the old guard of Australian politics is finished. That was Joe Bjelke-Petersen in 1987. And if you squint hard enough, you might just see the same movie playing out again in 2026, this time starring Pauline Hanson. Quick favour before we continue, if you are loving this, smash that subscribe button right now. Most viewers have not yet. It takes 1 second, but it helps this channel keep going. Thank you. Now let us continue.
Support for Hanson's One Nation has once more fallen, albeit this time by just 1 percentage point, leaving it 3 points behind Labor and now only 3 ahead of the Liberals, who seem to be slowly recovering. But after preferences, Labor still wins against both parties, really, despite being itself the most unpopular governing party that polls have ever measured. However low Labor's vote is, it still wins against the divided Conservatives. Hanson last night said, don't worry. She was finally about to announce her candidates and her policies for the Victorian election, which is One Nation's next big electoral test, and it's in just 4 months' time.
We have locked in about 74, 76 seats at the moment of the 88, so we have got our candidates.
Well, very high time indeed for them to be announced, and the policies we hope as well. But even then, it may now be a bit late, too late, because already without those candidates and policies, One Nation has dropped, its support has dropped by a third, according to some polls. Now down to 90% in Victoria, it's this news poll. I mean, it's still extremely good compared to where it was, but it's certainly not enough to do much except hurt the coalition. And in the meantime, the contest in Victoria has sharpened to a battle between the Liberals' Jess Wilson and Labor's new Premier, Ben Carroll, with One Nation barely rating a mention. Now, you may say, who cares about Victoria, but failure there could be fatal to Hanson's momentum federally. It could pop the balloon, change the narrative. Now, I've said before that Hanson has reached a point where she must pivot. She's gained the voters' attention. Boy, has she done that. Now she must gain their trust. And that means being normal, because normal now is enough. Stunts like consorting with convicted thug Tommy Robinson in London this month, that's a mistake. Hanson's got to campaign like a real candidate for Prime Minister. And that means especially she's got to explain her plans again and again and again until they seem clear and safe. And, voters go, of course. That hasn't happened. And again I ask, why has Hanson, for instance, not exposed the lies that Labor tells about her call for a monoculture? I know what she meant. I've said what she meant. Why has Hanson not explained herself what she meant? Instead, we've had Barnaby Joyce trying to explain it. Bjelke Petersen used to have a catch cry. Don't you worry about that. But Hanson must. She must worry and must sweat those details, must sweat those policies, or all this excitement will be for nothing.
So here is the parallel nobody wants to say out loud. Back in 1987, Joe had the charisma, the slogans, the media obsessed with every word he said. What he did not have was a costed policy. His flat tax idea sounded fantastic on a bumper sticker and fell apart the moment anyone asked how the numbers actually worked. When reporters pushed for detail, Joe was nowhere to be found, and it was left to people around him to try and explain what he actually meant. Sound familiar yet? Here is where it gets interesting. Joe did not just fail to win, he split the Conservative vote right down the middle, weakened the Liberals under John Howard, and practically gift-wrapped victory for Labor. The very movement built to punish the establishment ended up propping it up. That is the twist nobody saw coming, and it is the exact trap sitting in front of One Nation right now. Let us jump to today. The polling tells its own story. Support has softened nationally, and in Victoria it is reportedly dropped by close to a third. One Nation is still sitting a few points behind Labor and only just ahead of the Liberals, and yet somehow Labor keeps coming out on top after preferences, even while wearing the crown of one of the least popular governments on record. That is not a coincidence. That is vote splitting doing exactly what it did in 1987. Now here comes the real test. The Victorian election is only a few months away. Candidates have been locked in for the vast majority of seats, but where are the actual policies? The campaign is barely showing up in the headlines, and the contest is already being framed as a straight fight between the two major parties. If One Nation stumbles here, it will not just be a bad night in Victoria, it could burst the entire federal balloon. So what actually needs to change? Simple. Attention got Hanson through the front door. Trust is what keeps her in the room. That means explaining policies clearly and repeatedly, not leaving colleagues to clean up confusing comments after the fact. It means putting real numbers on the table for costly promises like scrapping the fuel excise or introducing income splitting and owning those figures instead of dodging them. It means correcting misrepresentations directly in her own voice rather than hoping somebody else does the job for her. Because here's the blunt truth. Disruption gets you noticed. Discipline is what makes people trust you with the top job. Joh Bjelke-Petersen proved that a movement can dominate the headlines and still collapse the moment voters start asking serious questions. Right now, Hanson stands at exactly that fork in the road, and the path she chooses over the next few months might decide whether One Nation becomes a genuine political force or simply becomes 2026's answer to 1987. Thank you for watching. Your thoughts and opinions are much welcome in the comments below. Just try to keep it respectful. I'll see you in the next one.